Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Morning Magazine for this August 7th, 2019. You have your guest host, James J. Maloff, and this morning for the whole hour, we are going to be joined by Sheriff Sean Becker and Joe Zerflu from the Wood County Sheriff's Department. Men, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, James, it's always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate the time. I do want to let you guys know right away that, for one, we have Wisconsin Rapids Community Media in with us, so good morning to Kevin over there, and thanks for joining us. And also, our phone lines are open for you, 715-424-2600. If you guys have any questions for the men here, please give us a call. We'll get you on the airwaves. For right now, first, it seems like everybody that I have in, and it doesn't matter who it is, my first question is the storms. And the first up, I'd like to ask how you and your families are doing. You guys okay? Everything went well?
Yeah, thank you. For me, personally, we had a lot of out-of-town company come in. My dad came in from Florida, and my brother came in from California, and cousin came up from Illinois. Because we had the ski show going on that weekend. We had the state water ski competition at Lake Wazicha that's been going on out there for over 50 years. So, yeah, we had a lot of people, myself, but I appreciate you asking, James. I hope everything went well for you too and your family. Joe will talk a little bit about it a little bit more because he was very instrumental as far as representing the Sheriff's Department that weekend. Just with the aftermath of the storms, we needed some administration help to help out with our emergency management. Our EOC was activated, so what that meant is Steve Cruiser, who oversees emergency management, basically has people come in, different leaders from within the county will come in and determine what the needs are. Right when that storm hit, you really don't know. And then what happens is dispatch just gets thousands upon thousands of phone calls are coming in, and Lori Heidemann in our Central Wood County Dispatch did a phenomenal job. Getting through all these calls. It got down to a point where the deputies and law enforcement officers within the county, basically when we would be driving around, that's what we're doing. We knew there were hundreds upon maybe thousands of trees down. Whatever road's blocked, we'd write it down and then later let dispatch know because so many phone calls were coming in. But we got through it as far as I'm aware of within the county's jurisdiction. The warning system worked very well. Wasn't any fatalities. If there was any reported injuries, it's very minor that I'm aware of. So that warning system getting out there was very important and it worked. And then speaking on the ski show, you have an event where thousands of people are at, and we had a major storm come through the area, and Wazicha was like a bullseye when that came through a few years ago. The warning system again worked out phenomenal. They canceled ski shows within more than an hour out. People were evacuated from the park, and no issues out there. Minor damage, but it basically put off the ski shows about 4 hours. People worked very hard to get that event moving, and before the evening hours, I think 3 teams got to perform before Saturday evening. It did push some of the event into Sunday, but it went through. But all in all, we're still obviously dealing with the aftermath of it. People were without power for several days. Some people were lucky they didn't lose power. Some people did for up to a week. So, but thanks for asking.
It's and Joe, I'll talk to you in a second here. Just to touch on that though, especially with the ski show, because we had Jordan Becker in from the ski team, and I've talked to a couple other members of the team. I didn't mean to name drop. I didn't want to name drop or anything like.
Anything you could say that I could give some brief about it. I can do it.
It is. It was so impressive to me that the event still went on. For one thing, But not just, but that kind of trickled into noticing that, well, wait a minute, a lot of things are still going on as planned. Even the following day for so many things that still did. So, I mean, to me, that is such a credit to them and just everybody that helped make that happen. But this community in general, too. It's just, I mean, even not talking about businesses, just people who were getting up and like right away out there pulling up brush and everything, like helping out neighbors and that. There wasn't usually with tragedies, especially if you watch them on the Weather Channel or anything like that, or I can think of when I was in California and they had the fires going on. There is for whatever you can say, there is a moment for people where they're kind of dealing, they're kind of taking in the situation, and it takes a moment for them to kind of register. Didn't really seem like that here. It seemed like people were right away just, okay, what can we do? How can we help? Or, checking out the damage that they had in their property and that. Joe, how did it go for you, and how were you involved in helping with this, with the storm? They say, the sheriff said they brought you in and everything.
Yeah, it actually just happened because we were having issues with alarms going off actually on county properties. So I just came in initially to help reset some of them, and then assist the road deputies, and there are lines down everywhere, and so we were doing our best to kind of help dispatch log those. Luckily, like the sheriff said, there weren't any major injuries. I've heard of a few, but nothing life-threatening. But obviously, almost everyone in the storm area had some type of damage, whether it was just losing a tree or significant structural damage. So, everything just kind of ran the gamut. But no, the power outage was the number one thing on people's minds after the weekend had passed, because I heard of one individual told me he was out for 9 days. I was out for 4, so
Okay.
that was kind of the worst thing after the initial damage, of course. So,
and I understand that there is a whole generation that doesn't know what it's like to not have internet and everything. So for them, maybe it was a little more intense than some of us and everything. But I think that you guys can kind of touch on this as well. You've both mentioned that there were no fatalities. That the injuries, we certainly think of the lineman that was paralyzed, and him and his family. But and talking to some members of that family and people from there, they announced this just as proud as us, is that was the most serious of it and everything. That it is a minor miracle that happened. I don't use that word lightly or anything, but that we got through this. And that's what we're dealing with. That is the aftermath of this. It could have been a lot worse, and the perspective is really important. We've talked about empathy before, especially when it comes to inmates and that. But the empathy that was around in this area for people. I mentioned it before. I saw some neighbors that my parents have lived near for over 10 years. They've always bickered back and forth. These guys were out there Sunday morning with a cup of coffee each, laughing at one of the sons chopping something up, having a tough time with something. I mean, they were kidding around. That shining a light on that, I don't think can get too overdone right now, and especially with there are people who are still struggling right now. There is still a lot of work to be done. When it comes to that, how is that going for you guys on your end and everything? I'm sure that you're still getting calls here and there or something like that. Has it calmed down quite a bit? Are you still
quite a bit? Like I said, when the storm came through, and I have to say it again, our dispatchers did just a phenomenal job of fielding call after call. Granted, they knew something was coming. That warning system had come out, so there was some preparation as far as, hey, we're going to get inundated with a lot of phone calls here. And they did. And they did an outstanding job. And for us as law enforcement officers, we only can do so much. We only have so many people on. And their priority was obviously if there's anybody that had any situation come up where somebody was injured, that's a priority that we have to go to and get EMS to. I remember bringing up the ski show again. I was at a funeral for one of our retired deputies. Richard Crone passed away when the storm came through. Great man. He had been with the department for over 30 years. He's a veteran, and our honor guard was there guarding the casket, and then the storm came in and I had to leave. Family was very, very understanding, and the first thought I had was, okay, where are the most amount of people here in Southwood County? And I thought of the ski show. And just getting there, I barely could get there. Every route was already blocked with either emergency vehicles or trees down, and the first thought is you think of the worst. It's like, okay, I know that there's, hundreds upon hundreds of people there, and I was just hoping for the best. And when I got there, all the, like I said, the teamwork, people working together, no issues out there besides some damage. I know in the campground, a couple campers were damaged, but again, James, like you said, going back to that teamwork and people working together really pays off in the community.
You mentioned Mr. Crone. I've been longtime friends with his son Pete,
Okay.
and I'm glad you mentioned him because it needs
Great
to be.
man.
It should be noted. Great guy, great man.
Yeah.
That's it's great that you were able to at least go for a bit and everything. But it was crazy that with the storm and all that, and the water ski show, and so many things to fall when that happens. But one thing that you touched on that I don't know if we ever give enough credit to. We always talk about the weather people when they're wrong. But we never, and you guys probably can relate to this pretty well, actually, because you guys your name doesn't get brought up enough when good things are happening. It's certainly when something negative happens. Oh, they cannot wait to bring your names up. But I mean, with the positives, we need to have a little bit more of both, I think. And with the weather people, the same thing. I mean, without their information and without being able to get that to the masses the way they were early on, it could have been a lot worse. So, credit where it's due there, I think.
The ham radio operators, they have weather spotters out there. And
Yeah.
You can see what's going on a computer with all the radar and all the technology. It's working for us. But then you have people out that are storm chasers, and then they're reporting that information like, hey, it's coming and it's this close, and that all that warning system works together, and that makes a huge difference. Going to Farm Tech Days, that was a big component of that whole event of having, all right, what are our plans if we do have, what could be the worst thing that could happen at that event? And the first thing that kept coming up would be a bad thunderstorm.
Yeah.
And it seems in Wood County that the Marshfield area gets a little bit more than we do in Wisconsin Rapids, and now is a big discussion and having all those things in place. And we were very lucky in that event. It was a little warm, but there was only one storm that went through that whole event. But that pre-planning is huge, and that goes back to the water ski tournament. Having that technology out there to take that information and then put your plans in place. I mean, you need to talk about those things. And going back to when our EOC was activated with Steve Cruiser, just to sit at a table with other leaders, within our community and figure out what the priorities were, and quickly. When you lose that much power in your city, well, what are the first things you need to get power to? Obviously, your hospital. You got to prioritize what goes on there. Granted, Riverview has a generator but only works for so long. Same with our courthouse. We were without power, but we have a generator going, but that's only going to work so long. And remember, we have over 100 people in our facility that we have to take care of. So just to have those discussions and prioritize what the needs are, how long is this going to be? Just listening to some of the people representing our local power companies saying, this is the worst storm they've ever seen. We've got hundreds upon hundreds of trees down on power lines. The first thought we had of, okay, this is going to be a long-term event, and we need to start planning for people. Okay, do you have generators? Where can you get water? Things of that nature. I was really proud of the fact of the leaders coming together, and same with the city of Wisconsin Rapids. They activated their EOC with their mayor, and Joe could talk a little bit more on that since he's alderman in Wisconsin Rapids, but. And then, having our communication back and forth. Okay, what do you need? Where can the county help the city and vice versa? Having those strong working relationships, no matter if you disagree on something, but when you need help, it's like you put those differences aside and you work together. Bottom line.
It's a Pro Bowl situation. Everybody's on the same team all of a sudden, and you're working together and everything, trying to make the best happen. When it comes to something like this, there's certainly prep, and there's certainly things in place for what to do if we get hit by a weather disaster of some type and everything. But you also one of the good things to taking silver linings from these kind of things is you can learn from them for the next time. And what are some things, if you can touch on some things things that both of you were able to learn from this, and that we can carry into the next time?
That's a good question. Joe could elaborate on it a little bit, but what impressed me was, having Joe come in, and then on the sheriff's department perspective, having the trust of the people that work at the department. They did very well. I was very impressed not only with Joel, but our shift commanders working throughout the weekend. Our other leaders, Calvin Dorhorst, he was in charge of our night shift. Our shift commander Adam Berry just did a phenomenal job of, all right, what are our priorities? And like we already mentioned, it was going to be hard to get into places, but we have to go to those calls where there's an emergency, and they did very well. I was very, very impressed. With our staff, our jail staff, they knew what was going on. And you have to look at too, not the jobs that we have as deputies, but their families as well.
Yeah,
that has to be a priority, because it's, people that are working in our corrections on the road. What's the first thing you think of? Your family too, and that's not being selfish. It's a fact of life.
Yeah,
and if just taking that whole thing together, I was very proud of our department and how we move forward, and working with other departments. Takeaways. I don't have many as far as the position I have. I felt that everybody worked well together, and that common goal of helping people.
There's still work to be done, so it may be one of those questions. It may be better to even re-ask a year from now or something, because then when you can assess, we're kind of still in the middle of it and everything. So we're still kind of our minds on the point at hand and everything. To your point about when this happened, it affects. You guys live in this area too, and it kind of getting back to what we've been doing since we've been talking here about the human side of not just you guys, but any politician I have in, or anybody really. Getting to that, they always tell you in a plane's going down, what is the first thing you do? You put your mask on first before you take care of your other. Of course, you want to put the mask on your kid first, but you don't do that kid any good if you're not taken care of. So to be able to look at your own backyard and say, okay, my family's okay, I can go ahead and do this. It's certainly very understandable, and almost a necessity in a way, because I almost wouldn't want you guys out there, well, no, I got to take care of the people first. That's great and noble. We appreciate that. But you're not going to do any of us any good if all you can think about is your family, which would be understandable. I know I would be. I'd be thinking about mine too. So it makes a lot of sense, the way that you would handle that and the way you would go. Joe, for you, maybe not so much about what you've learned from this event or anything, but what are some ways that you have been able to help with this, and how did it all affect you necessarily with that, with your personal life and balancing that, the job, personal, that?
Well, I saw rather quickly that I didn't have any noticeable structural damage or anything, so I wasn't really too worried about my property. But it was weird how like a house within feet 100 feet of me had a tree fall on top of it, so I guess that aspect, I did assess it, and maybe if I had damage, it of course would have been on my mind, but what can get taken care of now and what has to wait anyway.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and weigh in that. Yeah.
Right.
And thankfully there wasn't any too much damage, so you were able to kind of right away be like, okay, well, I got a job to do.
Correct. And our dispatch center, which is a separate department from the sheriff's department, but they were, inundated with phone calls. Initially on Saturday, I don't think people were upset not having power so immediately after the storm. But as days went on, of course, frustrations start to build, as they would for anybody, and that was a concern for me too. I lost a substantial amount of food, which my wife was happy about because she said it was all old stuff she wouldn't eat anyway. But dispatch is, you think that the first person you're going to call is like your local law enforcement or fire authorities. Dispatch handles all that, but they're not the utility company,
Right.
So. We have, I don't know how many different utility companies in the county, whether it's Waterworks and Lighting or Alliant, or there's one I think based out of Adams that covers like the southern part of Saratoga. They're not affiliated with the law enforcement and fire and dispatch. So, dispatch gets all these calls, but they don't really have answers for people. But they're trained to, I guess, expect that. And I know there was concern with the 911 lines being tied up. And I think getting that reminder out to people that make sure it's an emergency, because there is only there's a finite number of 911 calls that can come in at any one time. So they handle that pretty well.
We are speaking with Sean Becker and Joe Zerflu from the Wood County Sheriff's Department, and we're going to take a phone call from you guys real quick before our first break. Good morning. What's your question for the men?
Yeah, I really don't have a question. I want to compliment the sheriff's deputies that were through that storm. I happened to be a particular person that got to see both sides of it. Stranded at the Northwood County Park, the officer protected everybody from going around a tree with high lines in it. He did an awesome job. There was many people walking up there, and with every excuse they had to try to get through there, and he basically had safety in mind, and he wasn't going to let anybody through it. And to watch that, I have to commend that officer, because it was 8 hours, and through 8 hours, it had to get old. As the campers lined up, he just kept us calm and did a really good job. And on the other hand of it, I also worked with tree removal and out there in the storms. And when his officers can possibly do it, they'll actually help. Not that I want them to go throw everybody's brush around, but they will actually help the workers that are out there get a tree off the road as soon as possible and get the traffic flowing again. I've witnessed that myself. And just my compliments to them. They did an awesome job.
Some great points there, and appreciate the call, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Phil. I'll definitely pass it along to the deputies that worked up in the Northwood County Park when that happened. The caller brings up a very good point. When there are, lines down the road, and we talked about this. That was a priority to get that information out. And again, the caller brings up a very, very good point. What's the first thing that happens after a storm goes through? Everybody's curious. We understand that. They want to go out and see the damage, assess the damage, their own property, which I understand. But then the next thing, curiosity kicks in. And with a storm of this magnitude, how many power lines are down? They're down all over the place, and you don't know if they're live or not. And that was probably one of the first messages that we got out. I mean, number one, please don't be out. Don't be out driving. I do, again, get the curiosity point of things, but it's for your own safety. We do not, again, know if these power lines have power to them. There have been many, many fatalities, unfortunate fatalities, that people have been electrocuted to death because they didn't know, whether it's from a car crash or a storm, and it's for their own safety to stay put, shelter in place if you can. And that was probably, the bigger frustration that we had is, the storm's through, within an hour, traffic is up. There's no power on East Street. The lights, but I'm not aware of any crashes. I think there were some close calls I heard of, but
there's been more crashes when the lights are working. That does. I don't mean to make a joke about crashes, but I mean that is a little crazy. It is a little weird. The callers had a word in there that I've been wanting to touch on, and I just haven't found a chance to shoehorn it in. And I thank you for the call and the moment, the patience. So many of you guys have a black belt in patience when it comes to not just with the storm, but with anything, a domestic disturbance, of pulling somebody over, all these different things. And it's one of those things that so many people just kind of take for granted or push. And it is a balancing act. It's got to be another one of those things where you've really got to be able to gauge that and be, everybody has bad days, and on a bad day that your patience gets worn thin. I know. I mean, I'm a dad. We any of us that are dads understand what that could be like. But at the same time, there is a responsibility with what you do, and you have to have that. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be pointed out that like the caller said there, a big kudos to that officer and to all of you guys for the patience that you had with that, whether it is people with questions or anything. And even, one of the things that I think of too, and we'll take our break in a second here, but I just as long as it came up to touch on, maybe it's because of where I grew up and seeing so much violence and different things that I kind of got numb to it, and it doesn't. But does the patience? Does it have to kick in even more when you have somebody on the side, and you have them pulled over or it's an accident, and all of a sudden you've got cars slowing down because they got to stare, and they got to look at everything like the reporters or something like that. Like that drives me crazy. I'll tell you, I can't stand that. I don't know what they're hoping to see. I don't know what they're expecting is gonna They're gonna be able to like ask you guys questions like, hey, what happened here, or something like that. I mean, all they're doing is slowing things down and possibly causing another accident. So I'm probably alone on an island on that one, but I've never understood that, and I imagine the patience really has to kick in for that one. It's got to get a little annoying. It's got a little bit.
It does. I mean, if we have a major crash or an incident like this, we'll try to get roads blocked so we're preventing people, coming down there just because they are curious. I understand that, but as law enforcement officers, we prefer that people kind of stay away from an emergency scene. And once in a while somebody will either drive through or they'll come across it really quickly, and then they're not helping. But it's just a situation that you said you have to take a deep breath and have them move on. And we don't want them in any type of emergency scene because you can create another one, and that's unfortunately has happened. So as quick as we can, we try to get a road blocked and allow us to do our investigation or help perform life-saving measures depending on what the situation is.
We're speaking with from the Sheriff's Department, Sean Becker and Joe Zerflu, and we're going to give you guys a chance to take a deep breath and take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll take more of your calls if they have them. Otherwise, we've got the fundraisers we want to talk about and some other things too. Here on Morning Magazine, AM 1320, WFHR. Welcome to Morning Magazine Part 2. You have your guest host, James J. Maloff, in for this August 7th, 2019. We were joined from the Wood County Sheriff's Department, Sean Becker and Joe Zerflu. Guys, thanks again for joining us. We've been spent the first half an hour really talking about the storm and the effects of that, and want to just kind of give you a chance to wrap up what we were talking about with that. And
with the previous caller, again, thank you for the compliment. Joe and I were just talking, and the first name that came to mind was Deputy Brent Derringer, who was up working the north end of the county, and we had some damage up at Northwood County Park, and he was the one that got there immediately and noticed the danger of the power line issue and stood by there. So Brent, again, thank you, and thank you to the caller for bringing that up. Always appreciate compliments. And in closing, it's something that we've been talking about the last half hour on, how the community came together, leaders within the community came together, and, people worked well together. Again, the ski show, the leadership there from, all the different teams coming to the area, to all the leadership, all the, just the people that make that come together. And the host team that I've been part of for 7 years, the Wisconsin Rapids Aqua Skiers, just an awesome group of people. A big shout out to them. And you talked to my daughter Jordan already, and we're heading to nationals this weekend over in Warsaw, Indiana. We had a really good show that we skied on that Sunday after the storm, and our show director Pam Heineck did just an awesome job, and everybody came together after the storm, put together a great show, and we were rewarded with qualifying for nationals, and that's where we're heading this weekend. So we'll see what happens.
Talking with her about it and some of the other members, I mentioned to you guys that we were going into the show here, and I talked about doing It's a Wonderful Life and having only 2 weeks to get ready for that role, learn the lines, blocking all that. Talking with directors who know me better than I know myself as an actor, it actually, they felt it benefited me, that it actually worked better for me with the role, that I had less time to prepare. Sometimes those things that happen with the aqua skiers, talking with them, they weren't sure if they were going to go on or not, and then they decided that they were. were, and especially as the host team, they wanted to and everything, that can kick things up a notch sometimes. It can pull out a little bit of an extra gear that you didn't know you had, or some of these other things. And it's not necessarily that you're doing something that you wouldn't normally do, but the energy that it can bring, the pride that pulls out of you and everything. I think that stuff shows, and certainly we are going to be thinking about them and rooting them on incredibly. I saw that they have a live stream thing that they're doing with that. It's a really cool idea. That's a very neat.
We should ski around 11 o'clock on 11:30 on Sunday.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
we're going to be pulling for them. I wanted to touch on this real quick because we have a bunch of fundraisers we wanted to get to, and I'm really curious about the pink badge. I got to tell you right away. I saw that, and I got to ask questions about that. I got a lot of follow-up questions to that one. But there was recently a device found. And I know that we've, thankfully, that there wasn't, all bark and no bite, that kind of thing. But if we could touch on that a little bit, Joe, if you wouldn't mind, about what that entailed, what that involved.
Sure. What was on Gaynor Avenue has already been released, and there has been a lot of interest and questions about it. We did talk to, while on scene, several different times, the neighbors. And we understand their concern and everything. Basically, it was what was located was it was not active, and it was from what we can tell designed not to be active, but to look, the part. And I don't think I used the word bomb per se, because it was it was a small device that used traditional ammunition, shotgun shells, basically. So. What the intent of the device is still under investigation, and I know we struggle with that because we want to tell the media or the residents exactly what's going on, but we have to try to protect an investigation too, and not name individuals until we determine that there's going to be charges and things of that nature. But we do expect in the near future to be able to release more information about that incident. But when you find something, like in this case, that looks suspicious, our first step is not to touch it. We call, for our area, we call the Marathon Oneida County Joint Bomb Squad. And so they came down, they looked at it, x-rayed it or whatever, determined it was not active, and then so it could be safely retrieved. The general public was not in any danger. This was not a device that we believe was ever intended to be placed anywhere, like any public space or anything like that. So that much, we can say about it.
Well, and I appreciate what you can say and sharing what you can. I would like to hope that the majority of people out there do understand the way that this works. Whether we're talking about something like that, we're talking about a suspect of anything, you guys have to walk that line of, you want to let the public know, give them the information they can, but you have a job to do. You have a case to do. It doesn't just end with you arresting somebody. You've got to make sure that arrest is valid and so many other things so that the legal team can do what they do. And anybody who's seen a Law and Order episode, you would like to think that they'd get that. But I understand that what you're saying, too, that people also, they're curious and they have questions. We certainly, are welcoming that. We have no problem with that. But you also have to, I think those people also have to take into consideration that you guys got to make sure that the T's are crossed, that the I's are dotted, that everything is taken care of. And certain information, if you let it out there, the suspect hears that and they have a leg up on you. They have a head start or something like that. We don't want that. I think this is common sense, but, not always so. Appreciate what you can share, but I'd like to hope that people can understand why you can't share everything.
Right.
And about this or about anything else that we really talk about when it comes to a lot of these.
When we have ongoing investigations, that's information that we can't share, whether they're high profile or not. If it's something that's ongoing, we just can't give all the information out. And that's part of this situation. But I do have to say that, Joe's division, our investigation division, did a outstanding job handling the situation, how they developed information, executed some search warrants that were based on stolen property that were firearms, and how, the investigators came up with information. And again, we go to that teamwork aspect. It's not just one investigator, working this alone. Once a case becomes bigger and bigger, especially when you're dealing with burglaries, when somebody's committing burglaries, it's normally not just one burglary. They're hitting several different areas, including several different jurisdictions. So that's why it's really important that you have that teamwork, philosophy when you deal with situations like this.
We have a call coming in. Let's go ahead and take that. And good morning. You're on the air with the men. Good morning. Yeah, I think that was an over-the-back fence call. I think it might have been somebody with an item to sell or something like that. Which, I mean, maybe you guys might have been interested. You should have popped up. You might have. Now, one thing I did want to get to, certainly take our time with, was the amount of fundraisers that are coming up. There's a number of them coming up here. And if we could real quickly rewind a little bit to one that happened. Sure. And I wasn't able to attend, but boy, of all the events I've wanted to attend, this was one of the big ones, was the Vesta Dog fundraiser. Yeah. It is such a cool fundraiser with so many great things going on, but such an important cause. Yeah. One that I hope there isn't anybody out there that takes too lightly. We count on these canines for a lot of different things that, certainly they're smart animals, but they also are not human beings. They don't know necessarily everything that we know about different levels to this. The least we can do is make sure that they're protected. Right. Certainly the officers with those canines do everything they can. They're partners. They look out for each other just like a human would. But that added protection. We wouldn't expect you guys to go out there without a vest. Right. And not to put it on the same level by any means, but with that being said, I think that it's important with those. So how did the event go? How did it turn out?
Went really well. I've got to do a huge shout out to Stephanie Krause, who planned the event. She had an idea over a year ago. Met with us, that myself, Nakusa Police Chief Sean Woods, Police Chief Ermin Blevins, and Marshfield Police Department Rick Gramza. They couldn't participate in the event just due to some manpower issues, but just having that idea and exactly what you said, the importance of having canines throughout Wisconsin, making sure that they have a bulletproof vest just like we do, because they're trained to go into situations before we do, and unfortunately we lose a lot of canines every year, and this is just a great cause that Stephanie took upon herself and organized for well over a year. And she did a phenomenal job, and we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun at the event, having 3 different agencies there cooking together, and just the camaraderie. And we did tease each other just a little bit, as we went through the phases of. It was called a chopped edition. So we got the main ingredients, but then they brought us these extras that we had to improvise and go through it, and it went well. The event itself had to compete with a lot of other stuff going on in the community. We had the car cruise going on Saturday, with that ending over at the Lions Club. So, it could have been attended a little bit better, but, all in all, it was a successful event, and something that I believe Stephanie wants to continue. We'll just kind of look in the future at different dates. She had lots of vendors there. It was just a well-run event.
It's wonderful to hear. And with the date thing, it is tough in the summer to find a date that doesn't work or will work and everything. So that's so good to hear, though. We'll touch about some of the fundraisers coming up in a moment. We have a caller calling in. Good morning. We have a question for the men?
Yes, good morning. Kind of switching subjects here, I guess, but I know there's supposed to be a ban in Wisconsin Rapids on people using their cell phones. Why isn't that enforced more? Or what? I know it's probably not high priority, but you just drive around, you know yourself, you look around, and everybody there is talking or texting or something on these phones. What can be done to increase enforcement on that? And also I got one other question, or maybe they can comment on this in light of these recent shootings again. What are the Sheriff Becker's ideas on somehow curbing this, or his idea on gun control? Or I just like him to elaborate a little bit on.
Okay, I appreciate the call, but we only have so much time, sir. I'm not trying to cut you off or anything. As far as I believe that the caller was asking about the ban on cell phones, as far as people talking on their cell phone while they're driving, I think is
Right.
where he was going with that, and the enforcement of it. And as far as gun control, we could spend 2 hours talking
Right.
about that, and each of us have different thoughts and different feelings about it. If you guys want to touch on it, that's fine.
Sure.
But we have a lot of other things to get to, and not at all taking that subject lightly.
Oh,
I'm giving it. It's actually the opposite. That subject
Right.
is one.
There's a
of
lot of attention to
I
it
would
right now.
love to actually have you guys in to talk about that sometime. I think that'd be a great conversation. But it's one that we have less than 10 minutes of show left. I feel like
I can address it real quickly. Looking at the gun control issues, and it is a hot topic that's made to be political, I guess, at some different levels. But if you look at it at a local law enforcement level, such as at the sheriff's department, and I think all of our local law enforcement agencies, view it similarly, that things have changed throughout our response to these types of tragedies, that we often train on if a situation like this comes up, we're heading to it immediately, and we are going to take out the threat as quickly as possible. That wasn't the way we trained in the past, and we continue to train. Now, what we've done is taken a step further, is train people. Not only just our school systems, but our local businesses, because tragedies such as this could happen anywhere, as we see it. Active shooters usually target areas that a lot of people are at. And the more we can get information out to help people and train them on how to react, you can't just sit and freeze anymore. If you do that, you will be a victim. I can guarantee that.
Yeah.
You have to react a different way. And we teach people on how to do that. And we don't mind having those discussions because it could save a life. I hope it doesn't happen ever around central Wisconsin or anywhere. But if it does, the more we can get out and have the discussion and train people, the better we can to prepare for a tragedy such as this and try to help save lives. And we talk about that with anybody. If anybody wants a presentation for whether it's a church, a local business. Obviously, we've been working with our schools for a long time, but that's something that we want people to be aware that we're there to help, and we'll help train you through at least how to respond to an incident like this. Because, like I said, we hope it wouldn't happen here, but we all travel.
yeah.
We go to bigger cities. We go to the Mall of America, or we travel in airports, or we go to concerts and stuff like that. And it's always something that I tell people need to be aware of these types of situations, and the way you react can save your life and others.
Yeah, and it's a subject and a topic that needs to be talked about, needs to be addressed. I appreciate you taking the time to do that and touch on it and everything. And as I said, I mean, it's one of those ones where I wish we had more time where we could you really dissect it, really talk about it, and hopefully we will be able to more.
Yeah, I'd welcome that. And as far as the cell phones, that can be frustrating for law enforcement. There's been some local ordinances that cities have adopted, but no cell phone usage within the city limits. But Joe can correct me if I'm wrong or not, that those have been deemed unconstitutional.
There was some sort of case law that covered that. Marshfield and Rapids both enacted that. As a sheriff's department, though, we can't enforce that because that's city ordinance.
Yep.
But there is, correct, yeah, there is state statute though on texting while driving, and of course the general inattentive driving statute. If
We'll cover it.
yeah, if it's
Thank
interfering
you.
with their
That's where I
driving,
was
we'll
gonna go
stop
with it.
them. So
Yeah, and where that comes into factor, back in my career, I was a traffic crash reconstructionist, and as cell phones became more and more popular, and more people were, those were just a prior to have in your hand. What did we start seeing? We started seeing, some really bad crashes and fatalities, and now what that's changed for a traffic crash reconstruction. The first thing that we do is law enforcement officers coming up to a crash, especially a fatality or a serious injury crash, we're asking for those phones immediately. Because there are state statutes that you could wind up in prison if we can prove that you were on your phone or texting doing something inattentive and you caused a fatality. You can see some time, some prison time for that. So that's one thing I can mention that has been a big change as far as this technology and how people are just so accustomed to being on their phone. It's like you can't put it down for that short drive, and unfortunately we've lost lives with that, and that's why you've seen the statute change. So to the caller, I mean, if we see people texting while they're driving, we'll pull them over, and you're either going to get a warning or a citation. But it's not something that we ignore. And I know that the other law enforcement agencies don't ignore it as well. It's just an unfortunate situation that people are so tied to their cell phone and they can't put it down. Cars are becoming more and more technology driven, and they're not ignoring this fact, because new cars want to be as safe as possible, and that's where those hands-free devices come in, and you see that more and more being utilized.
I've always been really curious about the whole traffic crash reconstruction. So one of these days, I'm going to talk your ear off about that. I got a lot of questions. It's just a curious and interesting thing to take place. But more importantly, I want to talk about this pink badge you got over there and some of these fundraisers coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got a pink patch that I stole the idea from Chief Rick Groms up in Marshfield. We're up just visiting, and he had a different patch for his officers that was all puzzle pieces. And I'm like, oh, what is that? He goes, well, we're doing a fundraiser for autism. Mm-hmm. So then the officers can wear that patch for the month of recognizing autism, and if an officer wants to wear that uniform with the patch on, they're more than welcome to do so. So I got the information from Rick and looked up on this website that does our patches, and they had a pink patch idea, and a lot of other departments do it as well. One of our deputies' wives has cancer right now, and we thought, well, how could we do a fundraiser that for her, and to help them offset the costs of the medical bills, and like kind of pitched the idea to our command staff, and said, yeah, okay, we're going to do it. So we ordered a bunch of our patches, and in this pink, we'll have it's on our Facebook page, and we sold them to our staff, courthouse staff, other law enforcement officers. That's where we started with, just to kind of build up a little bit of some money for our deputy's wife, and and the deputies have put them on their uniforms. They can wear it whenever they want. I mean, now we're going to sell quite a bit more in October when it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and then donate some money, locally to one of the cancer research centers. But it's and you'll see, and the deputies don't have to wear them like in 1 month exclusively, because we all can say cancer's affected everybody's family at one point or another, and you don't have to wear it in honor of this deputy's wife. You can wear it in honor of not only her, but anybody. Like, I lost an aunt to cancer. I think of her when I wear it, and anybody can wear that patch on their uniform anytime during the year in honor of anybody.
That's a great idea. A really cool idea. We'll talk more next time we have you in, and when we get closer to October, we'll talk more about it. But you guys have other fundraisers going on as well, coming up at least.
Yeah, we have another one coming up. Cop on a Rooftop, honoring Special Olympics. Now that Dunkin' Donuts finally opened up in Wisconsin.
Yes. Yeah.
I just had to look at Joel because I wanted to.
Yeah.
Inside joke.
I can only imagine when we talk about police and donuts. Yes, exactly. We've got a ton of puns and jokes we can make. But that is great that they're here, and you're able to do this event with them.
Yeah, they're a huge partner with Special Olympics, and we've been doing it up in Marshfield for a couple of years now. So we reached out to the Dunkin' Donuts here in town, and we're going to Cop on a Rooftop on August 16th, 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. Myself and several other deputies, officers from Wisconsin Rapids Police Department. We'll have some Special Olympic athletes there. We'll be there up on the rooftop, waving to people on 8th Street. Come on in and make a donation to Special Olympics. That I've talked about this before. That partnership that law enforcement has with Special Olympics has been there for forever, between the torch run, the polar plunge, and the Special Olympics games in Stevens Point. it's just a huge partnership that we've had forever. So this is another opportunity we look at that we can put together to raise some funds for Special Olympics.
It's a great cause, and any of these we're talking about fundraisers or causes, they're important causes. They're great, and it's wonderful that you're able to help bring some attention to them, to raise some money for them. So I don't want to take away from any of that, but I think that one of the underlying things of this too, and you and I talked about this before, is also how that gets rid of the gap between community and you guys. That line that is making kids more comfortable talking to you guys. All these different things, these divides that we see in so many other areas, kind of getting rid of them and making it more and more comfortable for people to talk to you guys, to reach out to you guys, and all these different things, and to not. Again, humanizing. I hate to keep on using that word because it seems pretty common that you guys are human. You're human beings, but people forget that. People don't think of that. They see the badge or they see like an R and or D in front of a person's name and immediately seem to forget that they're a human being. Right. They're a citizen in this community as well. And these kind of events are a nice way of doing another thing too, whether it's Vest a Dog or it's this. It's another way of people, especially I think of kids, and kids growing up and feeling comfortable talking to police officers, talking to that. Hopefully they never have a reason to do, but if they did, it's that much more free for them to be able to do that and that. And look, I mean, I've talked about this in my own neighborhood in Chicago a lot. The idea of snitching being a bad thing or something like that, they got to get that out of their heads. If you care about your neighborhood, that's all that should matter. Don't worry about so-and-so's or your reputation in the street or something like that. You got a street to worry about. You want your people safe. That should be the first priority. Not worrying about your rep or something like that, because that rep goes up and down. Don't even worry about that. That's ridiculous to think of. So for people to be able to reach out to you guys a little bit easier and more and stuff.
Community events are great. Exactly what you said, James. A great way for us to interact, just out in the community, and we love doing them. Yeah. As many as we can. We'll be up at the Marshfield Fair coming up. We're gonna have people out there working with Marshfield PD. So those partnerships that I talked about, the teamwork between agencies is just huge.
We are speaking with from the Sheriff's Department, Sean Becker and Joe Zerflu. Before we let you guys go, is there anything you wanted to touch on before we get out of here?
No, I think we're good. Good show. James, always a pleasure having the opportunity to come here.
Really appreciate the time, you guys. Know how busy you are and everything. We'll talk again next month.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
And a big thank you to Kevin from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Great job, Kevin. We appreciate you. Nice work. We will have more Morning Magazine for you tomorrow right here on AM 1320 WFHR.